Hello, everybody. It's me again, coming to you live from my secluded bunker here in the foothills of central Connecticut. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope everyone's not going too crazy. Okay, let's get right to it. A reminder that Essay 2 is due on Wednesday, April 1st. That's this coming Wednesday. If you're having any trouble with Essay 2, please email me at this address, mrusco, ENG112@gmail.com, and we'll set up either a Skype appointment or a phone call to talk about it. Your homework for today is available now on Blackboard. It is very, very short, and it's due tonight. It is due Friday by, let's say, 7 o'clock. Okay? Your homework that I'm assigning today is due tonight, Friday night, by 7 o'clock. It is very short, so just get it done. And I need it immediately because it will be part of our class on Monday. All right, let us go over the homework for Monday. As long as we're talking about paragraphs in our essay, I want to go back over the essay that I assigned to you to read from the New York Times for Monday, and it is the 2020 election won't look like anywhere we've seen before. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble. I'm reading this backwards because it's backwards on my screen, but you know which one I'm talking about. You'll need to be looking at this essay as I go over it. So if you don't have a copy printed out, or if you can't get a copy on your phone, I suppose it'd be ideal to get a copy on your phone, but if you need to, pause the video, bring up the copy of the essay, and then we'll talk about it. So if you have to, pause now. Okay, let's go ahead. Again, as long as we're talking about paragraphs right now, I want to just go over this very briefly and talk about it in terms of its thesis, how they constructed it, how they structured the essay, and what the individual paragraphs, what effect each of the individual paragraphs had. Since I can't ask you what you thought of the thesis, I mean, in terms of our discussion, what I thought the thesis was, if there is a thesis statement in this essay, I think the closest thing we have to it probably is towards the beginning. If you look at the second sentence in the second paragraph, they write, the editorial board, which is listed as the author of this piece, a functioning democracy requires elections that are free, fair, accurate, and on time, even during a global health crisis. That seems to me to be the closest thing to the thesis. Let's see how they structured this essay. The first two paragraphs kind of ask the question, why? Why do we need this? Why won't these elections look like any we've ever seen before? And why is it imperative that we still have elections that are free, fair, accurate, and on time? The authors use the first two paragraphs to lay that out. They acknowledge there's no good time for a pandemic to hit. Still, it's hard to imagine a more vulnerable moment than the one we find ourselves in only months before some 130 million Americans expected to head to the polls to vote for the next president and thousands of office holders. The outcome of the November election could shape the contours of American politics and government for decades. So they sort of answer the question why by saying, look, even though we're in this horrible problem, it's too important, the election is too important to put off. The next couple paragraphs sort of ask a question of how. How could we do this? How would we go about doing this? And the rest of the essay answers, here's how. Okay? The authors say in the third paragraph, the election will pose unprecedented challenges to holding, or I'm sorry, the coronavirus outbreak will pose unprecedented challenges to holding a nationwide vote, the most obvious of which is the need to keep people physically separated. The 5th paragraph begin to answer the question, here's how we can do it. So to convey the thesis of a functioning democracy requires elections, even in a time of crisis, the essay asks the question, how can we do this? And then it answers the question, here's how. It talks about voting by mail, which, of course, for any reader is going to raise all kinds of questions. They begin answering those questions by saying the good news is that we have evidence that this works. In the next paragraph, they say experiments in the states have yielded several key findings, states that have used voting by mail. It says the success of mail-in voting in these states is encouraging, but to pull it off on a national level, preparations must begin today. It talks about printing ballots. In the next paragraph, it says these ballots will have to be ready to go out by Labor Day. Now, I want you to note something here, and this is important in terms of the way I've been telling you, one idea, one paragraph, okay? I want you to look at the paragraph that begins with the experiments in the states have yielded several key findings. Then look a little farther down. The next paragraph says the success of mail-in voting in these states is encouraging. The next paragraph says these ballots will have to be ready to go out by Labor Day, less than 6 months from today. All three of those paragraphs are on the subject of mail-in ballots, of voting by mail. They're all on that subject, but all three of them are different ideas, right? In fact, you can go back one paragraph before that when it starts talking about mail-in voting. You can even go back, yeah. The paragraph that starts the most practical fix is to make voting by mail. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight paragraphs, 5 consecutive paragraphs that talk about mail-in voting. They're all on the same subject, but they're all different ideas. If you read those paragraphs through, one of them says that voting by mail is a practical fix. One of them says, the next one says, the good news is that we already have evidence that voting by mail works. The next one says, the experiments in these states have yielded several key findings. The next one says, the success of mail-in votings in these states is encouraging, but to pull it off on a national level, preparations must begin today. And the next one says, these ballots will have to be ready to go out by Labor Day, less than 6 months from today. They must be postage paid. Signature matching software can help ensure ballots are coming from voters they were sent to. So you have a bunch of consecutive paragraphs, all on the subject of mail-in voting, but each one of them is on a different idea within that subject, therefore they are in different paragraphs. Okay, you see that? I hope so. Let's see. It continues talking about how we have a paragraph that says, making voting easy and widely available in a time of social distancing is the biggest thing we can do, but there are other steps we can take to ensure a safe, secure, and high turnout election. Then it lists those steps, each in its own paragraph. Okay? First, educating voters. Second, physical polling sites must still be available. Next, in addition, states should offer 2 weeks of early in-person voting. Next, finally, voter registration needs to be easier across the board. I've been telling all of you, and I've been telling some of you individually, that a way to make sure that your essays reach the minimum word count assigned by your instructor is to discuss your ideas in detail, develop them in more depth. The editorial board here writes, making voting easy and widely accessible in a time of social distancing is the biggest thing we can do. But there are other steps we can take to ensure a safe, secure, and high turnout election. They didn't stop there. They listed each of the other steps. And in doing so, they didn't just mention the step, they discussed each step in depth. You see what I'm getting at here? So if you finish your draft, you've got a strong thesis, you've finished a draft, you're at like 900 words and you've got to get to 1250, go back and look at the ideas that you've had, that you've presented in your draft, and see which ones you can develop. Look at the paragraph that begins, second, physical polling sites still must be made available. I should have finished that sentence, I'm sorry. Second, physical polling sites still must be made available for those voters who are uncomfortable voting by mail or unable to. They might have just left that sentence there. And they could have handed it in to me, and I would have said, more detail. Who is uncomfortable voting? Who is unable to? Because the editorial board didn't just tell you that physical polling sites have to be made available for people who are uncomfortable or unable to vote by mail. They didn't just tell you that and leave it to, or tell me that and leave it to my imagination. They described who would be unavailable to vote, who would be unable to vote physically, or by mail, rather, I'm sorry. Please forgive me, this video thing is still new to me too. They gave examples of people who would be unable to vote by mail. Because if they just told me that people are unable to vote by mail, I'd be thinking, well, who's unable to vote by mail? Everybody gets mail, right? Well, wrong. Native Americans, many Native Americans living on reservations, for example, do not have traditional postal addresses and would have a hard time receiving or returning a mail ballot. Many others will have to be moved as a result of the virus and may be hard to locate, both of which are true. What other examples could they have given me? How about the homeless? If you're homeless, you don't receive mail, right? So by giving those examples, the point that they make that many people would be unable to vote by mail is conveyed to me more strongly. I get that point better by giving me those examples. When I get that point better, that means the point they're using to support their thesis is made better. And they have a better chance of conveying their thesis to me. You see how that works? If you discuss the individual points you make in your essay in adequate detail, it will give you a better chance at conveying your thesis to the reader. You've probably been told in previous writing classes, show, don't tell. Don't just tell me things. Show me why your thesis is true. Remember, you have one job and one job only: convey your thesis. If you show me that all of these reasons for your thesis being true are valid, I'm going to see at the end of your essay, yeah, that thesis must, all their points are good, so I add them all up, your thesis must be valid. Later in the essay, the authors write kind of an interesting question that struck me a little odd, and I wonder how it struck you. Look at the long paragraph beginning, for the oldest continuing operating democracy. All right, you there? The editorial board writes, for the oldest continuously operating democracy in the world, the United States has a poor track record of prioritizing the smooth operation of elections. With a very few notable exceptions, we've been lucky that these failures have not crippled our ability to discern the people's will, the central demand of any Republican government. The threat posed by coronavirus is on a different level and will require a new degree of citizen participation and cooperation among officials at all levels of government. I thought that last sentence was particularly strong. The threat posed by coronavirus is on a different level. We're living that right now. So that point hits home with me. It will require a new degree of citizen participation and cooperation among officials at all levels of government. Yeah, since that point they just made before that hit hard with me, then yeah, I'm right on board. Then they wrote, for Republicans, this means giving up their addiction to anti-democratic and counterproductive measures like voter ID laws, which lawmakers in Kentucky were still voting to pass as recently as this week. That kind of ruined the paragraph for me because it seemed to me like this entire essay was talking about all of us, everyone, the entire country, and the editorial board went out of its way to kind of put a little dig in on the Republicans. Now, I happen to agree with their point about Republicans 1,000%. I absolutely agree with what they're saying. It seemed a little out of place for me here. It seemed a little like, look, you guys are entitled to your own politics. I'm not here to tell you what party to like or not like. I personally don't mind a little dig now and then at the Republicans for trying to limit the vote, because that seems to be what they're trying to do. But in this essay, which was about the good of the nation and all of us, and a new degree of citizen participation and cooperation, to take that little dig in that spot kind of sat a little funny with me as a reader. Kind of stopped me a bit. And I went, oh, but yeah. Like I said, I don't mind that dig, and I agree with what they're saying, but I just didn't think it was a place for it. But anyway, once they get through all of those paragraphs laying out how it can work, why it's important, they sum up with, for all Americans, no matter their politics, the most important thing to remember is that this election is not going to look like what they are used to, and to be patient if final results aren't in on election night. And in the last paragraph, the integrity of the election is critical to the legitimacy of the nation's next leader, and never more in this hazardous moment. It's essential that every eligible voter has an opportunity to cast a ballot, and that every vote is counted. You know, difficult to argue with that. People will argue with it. If you watch the news over the next several months, people will argue with it. Frankly, I think that everything they lay out in this election, in this essay rather, it's a wonderful idea. I think the chances of it actually happening are a different thing entirely. But overall, it's a very persuasive essay. So what we as writers should be doing when we see essays like this, we should be not just reading them for their content, but reading them for how they are constructed. Look at the strategy that they've used to convey their thesis, and how they've built each individual point, and how they have constructed each paragraph to make those points. We should be closely looking at those things. And then when we write our own essays, those are the things that we have to keep in mind. We not only have to make points that will convey our thesis, we have to construct paragraphs that will most effectively convey those points, which means one idea to one paragraph, and making sure that the sentences within those paragraphs are clear and concise and make sense and convey an individual thought. Each individual paragraph conveys a single idea. Each sentence conveys a single thought. We're going to get into that more next week as we begin to look at sentences. All right. Attendance question for today. I'd like you to email me the name of the star of the 1942 movie Casablanca. All right. I should have had that printed out beforehand. I didn't, but I did it now. There's the movie, Casablanca. Generally considered to be one of the 3 great American films ever made. One of the 3 greatest, I should say. Who is the star of Casablanca? Email that to me at this address. Okay? So, take a look at your homework. It's posted on Blackboard. Send the homework, submit the homework on Blackboard by tonight, Friday the 27th, by 7 p.m., right? Because I need those to do the class on Monday. Basically, on Monday, we're going to have a Q&A session. You send me some questions, I'm going to answer them. All right, so questions or problems about anything, about SA2, about our class, about anything at all, email me. And that's it. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Please stay safe and healthy. I miss you guys, and I will see you on, or you will see me on Monday. All right, talk to you soon. Bye.